now.
Great.
Okay, and I'm letting people in. And I'm going to spotlight us. There we go. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I'm so excited to have Ellen here today to talk about finding the right donors for your nonprofit. Like, we talked about doing this topic. I mean, I feel like we first met maybe back in March.
It was at least March, right?
Yeah, and I have been literally excited for this topic since we talked in March, because I know, like, having been a fundraiser, it's just such a thing that, like, you need to sit down and think about and really put some time and effort into it. So I'm so excited to have you today. I hope we have a few more people joining us, but if not, we are going to record this, and this will be a great resource for people to use later. But yeah, I'd say let's get started. I like to be prompt.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing to you in the audience. We have a small audience. Let's make it interactive. We won't wait till the end. You guys are gonna ask whatever you want to ask, and just raise your hand to get the opportunity to be heard, or unmute, or however you're gonna manage this, Carly. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We have a few more people joining us. So, when we get to 135, maybe we won't make it quite so interesting.
I love that. Wonderful. So yeah, here I oh, here's a couple more people. Let me get them in here. Great. So just really quickly, I'll introduce myself. My name's Carly Euler. I'm the marketing manager at MemoryFox. MemoryFox is a storytelling platform that helps nonprofits collect, organize, and share great stories from their community. Our organization is based in Buffalo. I actually myself am based in Rochester, New York, but we actually do have people across the country. And if anybody is interested in learning more about MemoryFox, at the very, very end, after Ellen has given us all of her wisdom, I have just a short little introduction to MemoryFox that I'd love to share with you all. But for now, Ellen, take it away.
Okay,
You're
cool.
the star.
My deck is going to kind of give you what I'm all about. So let me, excuse me, let me give you guys a little bit of background on me. First of all, I spent about the first 20 years of my business career in corporate sales. I sold mainframe computers. I doubt that many of the people here know what a mainframe is, or have ever used a mainframe, or certainly ever sold a mainframe. But that was in the days when one of my last reasonable sales was $50,000 worth of tape backup. And it had less memory, that $50,000 investment, than my 5-year-old Android phone does. So when I launched Bristol Strategy Group back in '95, yeah, you guys can do the math. I got really intrigued by the nonprofit sector because I found that fundraising was such a difficult issue for most nonprofit organizations. And I also discovered folks in the sector were doing things that made what is already difficult, raising money, they made it more difficult. So I decided, okay, you found your mission in life, Bristol. Let's repurpose some of the truly high-performing disciplines that I learned in my years in selling, and make them fit the philanthropic heart and charitable soul of our third sector, the social sector. So I'm a little bit different, and the rest of my small firm, we're a little bit different from most fundraising consultants because we don't do campaigns. We don't do capital campaigns. We don't tell you how to write grants. We work on performance management and data analytics. And you're going to hear a little bit more about the data analytics as we go through this program. So in case you don't already know what I look like, here's a picture of me. And we're going to talk about why you need an ideal donor profile. You guys know you can move our faces around, right? So, all right, I'll get with the program here. If you don't have an ideal donor profile, you are going to end up wasting money and time you can't afford to waste, because you'll basically be in the shooting gallery in the dark without any target to shoot for. And let me tell you exactly what the ideal donor profile, what that phrase really means. And I quote, I did not write this. I looked it up somewhere on the internet. The ideal donor, or the ideal customer, or the ideal grantor, or the ideal corporate sponsor, and P.S., the ideal board member, the ideal employee, be whatever it is the perfect fill in the blank for what your organization stands for. Excuse me, I had laryngitis and I'm still a little hoarse. So this is like an avatar. That's the term we're using, term of art these days. But it's a fictitious donor with all the qualities that would make them the best fit to invest in your nonprofit's cause, mission, or programs. Every nonprofit is competing for charitable donations from funding sources, whatever they may be. But I'm here to tell you, if you run a food bank in West Kneecap, Idaho, and I run a food bank in Center City, Baltimore, we are going after different donors. We're not competing with each other. For one thing, you're in Idaho and I'm on the, Maryland. But way beyond that, there are specific things about you, your program, your organization, and so on, nuances that make a big difference as you craft this. Now, we started to do some research way back in 2011. I thought it would be a cool idea to have something interactive on my website, and so I created the original Leaky Bucket Assessment for Effective Fundraising. I didn't realize at the time that there were no popular or academic studies of fundraising team performance. And when I say fundraising team, I mean employees, volunteers, contractors, or members of the governing board. I don't care if the person who's raising money for you gets a paycheck, but if they are raising for money and you don't have a good ideal donor profile, you're making their lives more difficult. As I said, we've been running this particular version of this assessment since 2011, and we didn't get a lot of feedback during the pandemic, so we're late at coming up with the latest version. Don't hate me. We're currently working on doing one for 2024. So guys, go to our website. I'll give you a link to it later. But the statistics have never changed, no matter how many samples we have, or how many people filled out the assessment. This version of it is free, by the way. And we are just in the process of publishing a new paid version that's much more sophisticated. But if you're running a small org, take the free one. And this is really kind of a horrifying set of data here. Of the 1,500 or so people who have contributed assessments, only 6% of them have an ideal donor profile that includes wealth capacity, how much they can give, and whether or not their motivations for giving are a good match to your mission. And as you can see, if we just looked at the first two, that's something like 84%. I can't do math in my head, so excuse me if I screw that up. 84% have no documented ideal donor profile. And then another 18% just look at how wealthy is that prospect, which is a bad idea because I already told you that. The first rule of fundraising is no money, no mission. Like any other type of business, a nonprofit has to fund itself adequately. And that means paying decent wages to your staff, no matter how small that staff is, having paying for adequate facilities, or if you're all virtual, at least sufficient technology. Because if you don't have such a profile, it is tougher to raise money, and you're already exhausted. I know that. I don't want you to be more exhausted. Okay. We are going to track through 4 steps. I just like to remind people, if you do things like this the right way, they are simple. Simple, however, does not necessarily mean easy. So I want all of you to tuck up your skirts, so to speak, tighten your belt a notch, and be prepared to invest some effort in this stuff. You're going to have to take a little break from running around like a chicken without a head, trying to raise money, to doing the strategic stuff. So, step 1, before we get to step 1, the rules of the road, or the rules of engagement, or whatever other phrase you want to have. All of these exercises should be done in a group by consensus. So we're not only relying on Fred's ideas about who the ideal donor. Fred, you've got to shut your trap sometimes and let other people speak up. So everybody click or something if you get me, right? Carly, can you check the chats? We have a couple of chats. I want to make sure we don't miss them. All right, so here's step 1. Coming up with your value proposition. Please do not say, oh yeah, Ellen's talking about the elevator pitch. Your value proposition is not the same as your mission. It's not the, God forbid, elevator pitch. It's an understanding of what makes your nonprofit worth other people's investing in it. Whether that investment is money, time, or goods and services. Oh, that's what I was looking for, gifts in kind. And I'm going to go through a little bit of how you define your value proposition, but you're going to get a little present at the end of this. When Carly sends out the link to the recording, she's also going to be sending out a PDF of the slide deck and 4 documents that are templates you can use in your organization to fulfill these next steps. So here's what the value proposition is. We sometimes refer to the value proposition as value added. So again, let's take our Idaho-based food bank and our Baltimore-based food bank. So just based on the size of it, maybe the Baltimore-based food bank has access to frozen crab cakes once or twice a year, right? Baltimore, Maryland, crabs, you get it. And Idaho, the food bank might occasionally have some elk steaks, thanks to generous hunters in the neighborhood. Yeah, don't hate me if you're a vegan. That was just for purposes of illustration. So your value added is what you do well. And we like to call this half a SWOT analysis. The way we find it's easy for you and your team to figure out your value proposition, half a SWOT analysis. SWOT is an acronym that stands for internal strengths and internal weaknesses, external opportunities, and external threats. And if you are doing formal strategic planning with a facilitator, they'll probably have you conduct such an analysis. But for the value proposition, all we're doing is a SWOT analysis. We're just going to ask ourselves, what do we do that's really great? And what are we also faced with that's hampering our ability to perform? So here's a completely fictitious set of examples. Everybody loves our CEO, but we know we're too dependent on our CEO. Remember, this is brainstorming, so don't worry about who's got the right contribution. And we say, well, you guys can read this. I don't have to read it to you. Please don't take, this is only an example. Ideally, if you have 4 or 5 people that you can get together for this exercise, you should probably end up with somewhere between 15 and 25 strengths. And I don't care how many weaknesses you can have. You can have 1,000 weaknesses, be my guest. The reason I like to add the weaknesses at this point is because many times your group is so frustrated by what you don't do well or can't seem to get done that it's hard to focus on what's working. So I'm going to let you put up some weaknesses. Now, the next step after that, let me continue to explain, and I don't have a slide for this, but you'll see all the details in your template. So first you do your S and W. Then you look at that and you say, and guess what you do with the weaknesses? You throw them away. Or you save them somewhere, but you don't pay any more attention to them. Then you're going to look at the strengths and review them and see where you have duplication and where things might be smushed together because they say the same thing, but with a slightly different nuance. Then you're going to say, let's all pretend we are donors or grant writers or grant makers or whatever we are, what kind of funder we are. Which of these, and we're going to go over all items on your internal strengths list and mark them H for highly persuasive, M for moderately persuasive, and L for whoa. I can't figure out the adjective. Lowly persuasive. And then you got to look at it as a group again and say, is that right? But at the end of the day, what you're going to end up with is only those items that you all agreed were highly persuasive. So your final list of your value proposition are these internal strengths. And I'd be surprised if your list was more than 7 to 10. Okay. So now we know, pardon what I'm going to say, what you have to sell, what you're promoting to prospective funders. And I hope this is making sense to people. And if it isn't, speak up or write a screaming chat.
I think it definitely is. I'm loving this. I think it all makes sense so
Okay,
far.
great. Now, step 2 is, what about factoids? Do we do better with older people or younger people? Or is there a gender difference? Or is there something about where they live? Are we more likely to get people from the high rent district, the low rent district, the industrial district? That I don't know, but just what you can see here are examples of factual criteria that are always available in the public record. The most sophisticated way to look up these facts is by using a prospect research service like Donor Search or iWave or Wealth Engine, or there's not a lot of players in that industry. But you can also use the old-fashioned method, reading the newspaper, looking people up on LinkedIn, and so on. So now we have 2 sets of characteristics. Your value added, the things that make your organization interesting to potential investors, and I'm going to use that term to cover all types of investors, and whether or not those investors match certain factual characteristics. P.S. You guys all know that if you're getting money from foundations, you can use Candid or whatever the foundation directory is called these days, or GrantStation and so on, to find out their equivalent stuff, like how much they give, who they give to, what their grant guidelines are, blah, blah, blah. So this part is pretty straightforward. Simple, not easy. You're going to have to work on it. Now we come to an important criterion. If you're looking at donors, there is not a good correlation between level of wealth and what's often referred to as giving capacity. If all wealthy people gave away a huge amount of their money, there's a lot of second, third, and fourth homes and yachts and private airplanes and luxury hotels that would be crying in their beer about now. So you really need to be open to people whose motivations for giving are a great match, and selective about whether or not you have the right factual match and the right, you're willing to take lots of smaller gifts if you can't find larger gifts from people who also are very motivated by your mission.
Ellen, I'll pop in real quick.
Yeah.
I love that you brought this up. I think about this a lot, especially like I'm a millennial. I know I have a lot of friends who are Gen Z, and I think sometimes us, just because we're younger, we kind of get looked over as not just because we don't have as much wealth right now, but over time we might. And if we're loving your nonprofit now, maybe over time we'll have more capacity to give. But I think this is such an important conversation about the like you were saying, like the capacity to give versus an actual person's generosity. Like
That,
yes,
that's exactly right.
I love that.
My favorite cousin's eldest daughter became very interested. By the way, she's in her mid-50s now. She became very interested in one of the in a refugee resettlement charity, and her first paid job, that charity hired her right after the war in Kosovo to manage their fundraising. And she's quite a distinguished nonprofit leader at this point. But she didn't have, what does she have as a high school student? $5 out of her weekly allowance. So, and another important thing, especially if those of you on the call are running small organizations, having a large following and a large base of people investing in you at modest levels makes your organization more resilient and more sustainable than making all of your money for one or two government grants or contracts. You're vulnerable then. So this is part of why you want to be so selective about these things. Now, step 3 gets to the part that's tough to figure out. It's easy to know about your own organization. Well, I hope it's easy to know and get through that exercise in an hour and 90 minutes. It's easy to look up the other kinds of data. But step 3 is finding out what motivates people to want to give you money. These are only 4 examples. There are many, many other examples. The 4 I've listed here kind of pop up everywhere. If you grew up in a situation that you don't want your friends or your kids or your grandkids to experience, that's a strong motivator. If your family or your religious affiliations had a tradition of giving, that's great to know. Whether you share that as a fundraiser or not, that's often a big motivator, which is one of the reasons that houses of worship are the most heavily funded nonprofit organizations in North America. Because people are going to church every week and they're tithing and doing all that stuff. Wanting to see a better future for others, pretty obvious. Getting passionate about, well, if you're a vegan, you're probably pretty passionate about animal welfare and animal justice. If you, well, I don't have to go there. I mean, this is self-evident. Now, here's the part that's not self-evident. How you find that stuff out? Let me just, I forgot what comes next. Yes, this is how you find out what their motivations are. I would like to suggest that when you get the materials that Carly's going to send you, the first one you read is the template suggested prospect interview questions, really. We came up with a long list of such questions. The best thing to do is sit down with a few of your teammates and say, let's narrow this set of questions down to no more than 4, maybe 5. And none of them are designed to ask, hey, would you give us money? They're all, and what you do is you go back to the donors or board members or other advocates, maybe they're graduates of your program. And what I always like to do, because everybody is either on text or email, send them an email and say, hey, Schmutzy, would you do me a favor? We are doing some work on our marketing, and I would like to ask for 20 or 30 minutes of your time to provide me some guidance. There's nothing people like better than to ask to talk about themselves. And there's also nothing that works better than to ask people to do you a favor, especially if the favor is not, hey, would you give me some money? So all of these questions are kind of in the realm of, tell me about yourself. So I think you'll find 3 questions that are highlighted in this template. And my 2 favorites, they're not the ones to start with, kind of go like this. If our organization was able to thrive beyond your wildest imagination, what would that look like, and why would that be important to you? People, I don't know why people respond so fervently to that question, but for one thing, it's unexpected, right? So first they say, good question, let me think about that. And then the next question is, okay, I write this down, I'm writing it down. The flip side of the question is, let's flip this upside down and say, you had to close your doors. What would that look like? And how would that feel to you? Now, I have heard an answer as follows. I would be thrilled because it would mean we had solved the problem. I think this was an organization that was doing research on an orphan disease, okay? But I also had we've done some work with my all-time favorite client in Kenya that provides scholarships to Kenyan children so they can attend high school, because high school is not free in Kenya. And the leadership of the organization took their alumni team out camping in the bush, and we had a lot of laughter over the fact that they had to slaughter 2 goats and barbecue them. We still laugh about that. Anyway, they asked this negative question: what would happen if we had to close our doors? And they said several of the alums who are now either in university or running businesses or had good jobs in Kenya, they burst into tears. And they said, we can't let this happen. P.S. The alumni group now supports, I think, 3 full-time year-round scholarships every year. So that's not small money by Kenyan standards. So asking these questions is wonderful in 2 ways, because when you master it, your anxiety about talking to strangers kind of goes away. Because you're going to start out talking to people you're comfortable with. And second of all, these are the questions you ask to get somebody into the state of cultivation. And at a certain point, you can say, boy, you sound like such a great match for us. Would you be willing to consider making a financial investment, or volunteering for us, or giving us, 10 pallet loads of office supplies, whatever it is? Okay, so that was step 3. Oh, here we are. Yeah. What makes you a charitable person is also another great thing. Don't ask them for money. Another hint here is, Mary, you've been so kind. I just want to do a time check. I asked you for 30 minutes of your time. We're at the 22-minute mark. And I have a couple of other things I'd like to hear. Invariably, they say yes, or they say, we've got to end because I have an appointment. Don't be surprised if some of these interviews run an hour or an hour and a half. Especially if you're talking to current donors or current board members, if you're a startup organization. Oops, I didn't mean to jump ahead. But don't ask them for money. There's a wonderful saying in the world of fundraising. Ask for advice, you get money. Ask for money, you get advice. So
I have never heard that before, and that is so true.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
So the kinds of questionings that you want to be able to master, you don't talk very much. You ask these wonderful open-ended questions, and then you make, oh yeah, I understand that kind of noises that maintain rapport. And if there is a solicitation, it's not so terrible anymore. Because at some point, somebody's going to say, you know, we're currently giving you $500, but I think we should be giving you $1,000. And what do you say? You don't say, oh my God, I can't believe that. You say, oh, that's great. We would really appreciate that. So all of your emotional feedback is tempered. It's quiet, that it's not a surprise that somebody wants to give you more money. Okay, you're with me, guys. Now, there's an important part of the ideal donor profile that not enough people talk about. And we call that the danger signs. Example, big talk, no action. I'll give you this gajillion dollars to run your program for homeless pregnant teenagers as long as you open a dental clinic or something wacky that, you know, or I'll give you $500 if you name the building after me. Let me tell you, we've seen that. And then there are all of the unprintable things that I don't want to talk about. Now, talking about the danger signs, I guess we're not as sacred and holy and wonderful as we think we are, because this is the conversation that really gets people going. And I've seen people actually put in their criteria, no a-holes, okay? Excuse me, but exactly how would you define that? So you need to know what you want, but you also need to know what you don't want, what you want to avoid. You can find out a lot about whether or not a particular prospect is going to torture you for 6 weeks before they give you less money than they can afford to, and much less than you need them to give. So it's just as valuable to know what the positive criteria are, as well as to have some idea of whom you want to avoid. Now, before you all throw Rotten Tomatoes at me, I want to make one major caveat. If you are raising money in small donations, low dollar transactions, they're called. That's the 10, 20, 25, 40, 50 bucks. You don't need to worry about the danger signs. You only need your marketing to attract people based on those values, the giving motivations. Don't worry about danger signs or gift capacity until you're trying to cultivate larger gifts or larger grants. And you get you get to be the one who defines what the floor of a major gift is. I think AFP says it's $1,000. Others tell me it's $5,000. A children's hospital in our part of the country says it's $25,000. World Vision says it's $100,000. So use your best judgment. But the ideal donor profile, I'm going to go backwards here for a moment. In many ways, the most important element is this: understanding giving motivations, because that is the source of a great deal of your marketing, your digital content, your memory videos and testimonials that MemoryFox does such an outstanding job of helping you gather, and so on. So here's what you're going to do. And I should have done this, and please forgive me, I didn't put a copy of the actual document. You're going to get a sample scorecard from Carly. It is a very simple Excel spreadsheet, and it's called Simple Prospect Scorecard. There's a more sophisticated version of it, but I knew it would confuse you to start out with it. All the scorecard does is it helps you list up to 5 factual statements. Now this, let me tell you why I want you to limit the number of criteria to 5 in each category. It means that you and your team have to come to consensus on the 5 most important entries in that category. It's fine if there are other positive or negative things to know about, but less is more when it comes to data analytics. And one of the reasons you want to be able to actually document this is so that from time to time, when you do I can rearrange my mouth. When you analyze your donor base or your funder base, wouldn't it be nice if you can see how many people were really good matches? You know, how you segment your donor base in comparison to this set of criteria. You're going to score each prospect. So every time you're going to open this little spreadsheet, which is filled with completely fictional but reasonably representative statements right now, you replace all the statements with your statements. And then when you're looking at Carly or you're looking at me, you put the name of the prospect on the top of the scorecard, and then you say Ellen or Carly or Fred, our friend Fred, matches that line item at a 5 or a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or a 1. The danger signs get subtracted. So the highest possible score a prospect could get is only 50 points. Any of the danger signs are subtracted from that 50 points. And you'll see on the scorecard itself how to rank them. So like, I can't remember, but 0 to 10, they get a D, which means you don't want to spend a lot of time cultivating them. And as I say here, you limit personal effort. The most expensive asset in your organization is your time spent with donors. it's incredibly valuable. So it's not a good idea to figure out that somebody ranks as a D against your criteria, and you decide, although they've never given you any money, that they deserve hours of your cultivation time. It's a bad idea. Now, we're almost done, and then we're going to open to questions and conversation. Ta-da! You now have your ideal donor profile. Now, you follow pretty much the same format for ideal grant maker and ideal corporate sponsor, okay? Now, there are many other uses for the ideal donor profile. Knowing your audience is what powers marketing. So at least these 4 things are directly tied to the degree of clarity you have on who is most likely to invest in your organization. Because those who are a good match are going to give you more money with less trouble and less time on your part. A lot of people are not willing to say, give to you, forget it. Swipe right? Or left, or whatever we do to send them to junk mail. So if it's they don't like to say no. So if it's taking too long and they're coming up with a million excuses, and the dog has a hernia operation scheduled for next week, and my son-in-law is coming in from Zurich, no. When you know your target audience well, you're going to start learning what is the correct, how to leverage search engine optimization, how to attract new prospects. And that is that your outreach, your digital outreach, your participation in webinars and panel discussions and podcasts and email marketing and all the other jazz you can do will not only attract new prospects, but attract new prospects who are already warm leads. They've already pre-selected them. There's something you said that resonated with them. And they said, I want to find out more. This is a cause I believe in. And by the way, the ideal donor profile includes your ability to talk to a donor or a prospective donor. You can already assume, based on the initial scoring of that person, some things about them. So it's like meeting an old friend. I believe the single most valuable reason for building these ideal donor profiles is to guide your discovery calls with prospects. Now, there's discovery and there's discovery. And the older I get, the more I learn about this stuff. The same thing that guides your discovery calls, somebody says, get in touch with so-and-so and tell him, and you can use my name. That's great. But you may discover that so-and-so is already giving all their charitable money to an orphan disease suffered by their grandnephew and their alma mater, and they ain't got no more money. Or nice person, not interested. There are things about the ideal donor profile that also assist your stewardship. And if you're one of those lucky organizations that's been able to persuade your board members to participate in stewardship activities, like a phone call, God forbid, once a year to every single donor, no matter how small the donors are. They already know, they should already know something about those donors just by the score you gave them. And other things that you've taught your volunteers to do. So I just want to say, in case you didn't figure it out, I can't think of a more important thing to do first when you want to improve your fundraising results than to have an ideal donor profile. So Carly, let's open this to questions.
Yeah, wow. Okay, this was amazing. Thank you so much for everything. I feel
Thank
like
you.
I'm so glad that our audience is also going to get the templates to go with it, so they can, like, you know, really put it into practice. Because I think sometimes we go to these webinars and we learn things and then we think, well,
Yeah, the
when am I
shelf
going to
life
do?
isn't very long, right?
Yeah, it's so nice to have it there to look at, fill in the blanks. Love that. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, please do either, let's see, come off mute and ask, or go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear from anybody. But in the meantime, I do have a question. So
Yeah.
while you were talking about so you talked a lot about the prospect interviews. So fascinating, the questions that you were talking about. My question is, and I apologize if you covered this, but who do you recommend should do the interviews, and how often should you be doing interviews like these?
That is an excellent question. Do not outsource those interviews. If you're a fundraising professional or a fundraising volunteer, you do them. If you're in leadership, you need to do a few of them.
Okay.
Your board members need to do a few of them. Finding out what's out there is amazing. And the act of doing the interviews yourselves has a very powerful impact on something that most of us suffer from, and few of us are willing to admit to ourselves. Nobody likes to ask for money. It freaks everybody out. Now, I've been around a long time in the selling biz one way or another, so I'm kind of over it now. But one of the most important things to do is be comfortable talking to strangers. So I can't talk to strangers on your behalf. Nobody but you can talk to those strangers, which is one of the reasons, if you currently have a base of individual donors, you should speak to a few of the donors who you know and like the best. Always start where it's easy. The first time I taught this to someone, she went out and she interviewed her father. You know, if you can't talk to mom, dad, right?
Then you need some more practice. Yeah.
Yeah. And it turns out her father had been a donor to this. It was a big event that this small organization ran. And when he did the event, it's called Over the Edge, if you're wondering, and people pay money to climb off the top of a skyscraper. Now they're all attached to a million things. You know, there's no real risk involved, but it's still scary. So he did it, and she went to him later, and she did this whole interview. So that's a critically important thing, is that you guys have to do these interviews yourselves. It doesn't matter if a third party does them, because you didn't hear not only the words that the interviewee said, but the music behind the words, the meaning between the lines. Does that help?
Yes, definitely.
We have a little time, so Carly, if you have any questions, unless
Sure.
I see there's 2 new chats here. Let's take a quick peek.
Yeah, it looks like Deanna asked, Ellen, can I get a rundown of your experience? It says you
How long do you
remind,
have, Dina?
it says
Okay.
that you remind her of a professor she had.
Oh, cool. Well, I have been working primarily in sales since the early 1970s. I worked for a very small organization that sold one of the earliest standalone word processing systems. Then I sold for one of the major companies that sold word processing systems. Then I went and I sold mainframe computers, which back in the 70s and 80s cost millions of dollars. So you can imagine what they would cost in today's money. And in 1995, I'd had enough of corporate America, and I opened my own shop. And I worked on sales consulting for the first few years, but throughout those, right from the beginning, I was consulting to nonprofit organizations. So I'm one of the very few consultants in the market who never worked as a fundraising consultant, which kind of gave me an edge because I didn't have any bad habits and I just looked at everything.
Yeah, from the data, that makes sense.
From the data, exactly.
I do think sometimes, because when you do work in fundraising for so long, sometimes you just feel so emotional about your mission or about your donors or about your sponsors that I do think that sometimes it does, it is valuable to have maybe someone who has a little bit of a different perspective. I love that.
Well, yeah, I just want to jump in, Ellen. I just want to jump in. It doesn't surprise me that you have a sales background.
Right.
It seems like you really know how to connect with people in a way that, I mean, only in some ways experience can lend.
I
right?
agree with that, and thank you. I'm very proud of my sales background, and I had the good and the bad. I mean, the bad was working for less experienced, much younger, and far less well-educated guys who treated me. Yeah, let's not use that.
No, my mom was a real estate agent and broker as well. So, but anyway, it's what I want to say is I'm just really I made a lot of notes, and you've broken this down in a way that's extremely easy to understand, and if practiced is a real easy way to connect with people. And that's what I find just so intriguing. But then on the flip side, you're really speaking to like knowing the research, knowing the information, and using that to your advantage. So it's, some real two really good weapons, or
Oh, well, I just can't thank you enough. And this leads me to, here's how to get in touch with me. We are launching Bristol Analytics because now that I'm older than God, I don't want to work so hard anymore. So we've been working the last 3 years or so to repurpose some of our methodological approaches into actual software. And I invite you all to take a look at both of these websites. So meanwhile, my time is up. I actually have another appointment. Dina, thank you so much for your remarks.
Thank you for your time. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn.
I love that. Yes, let's all connect on LinkedIn. Thank you all for coming. If anybody does want to stay on for a few minutes, Ellen, you're welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
I really have to jump.
Okay. I'm just going to share my screen quickly and tell you all a little bit about MemoryFox. So let me do that right now. We'll get started. Okay, so let me see if this will just present, please. There we go. Okay, wonderful. So when it comes to MemoryFox, like I mentioned, what we do here is we're a technology solution for nonprofits that help you collect, organize, and share the great stories that you already have from your community. Because a lot of times people will ask you what your mission is, and you have, you know what to say. You know your mission like the back of your hand, but are you able to show people? And in this world where everybody is so focused on video and photo and things that can really take hold of your emotion in real time, it's more important than ever to be able to show someone. So we find that when we talk to a lot of nonprofit professionals like yourselves, there really are kind of 3 reasons why they have barriers that come with showing their mission. Number 1, it's that collecting content can sometimes feel like you're pulling teeth. You're asking people, and maybe they just don't have a good way to get it to you, or they're not feeling inspired to give it to you. Number 2, the organization of the content after you have it, that can be frustrating. It also can be time consuming. And then finally, a lot of nonprofit professionals will say, well, we just need a more efficient way that we can actually share our story with our community after we've already collected it, and making sure that it's really compelling for them. So because of these barriers, we created MemoryFox. It's built specifically for nonprofits to be able to go through this 3-step process to address every single barrier you might have. So step 1, we do collect. We help you with the collection. Step 2 is organize, and step 3 is share. And I will explain just a little bit about each step. If you do want to go ahead and scan that QR code, you can see for yourself how the collection process works. Basically, verbally, how it works is we help you build branded campaigns, and then you distribute that link or that QR code directly to the person you want to get the story from. So that can be your donors, that can be your program participants, your board members, your staff members. The possibilities are endless here. All they really need to do is just click that link, and then they could submit their pictures, their videos, a written testimonial. They can do it in real time, or they can upload. Some really cool things about the way we collect is that there's no download or login required. So people don't have to download an app. There isn't those extra barriers that might stop people from even getting started. Second, we always we give you the option to capture your consent up front and be able to manage your own consent. So whatever legal language makes sense for you and your state and your mission, based on how you're planning to use the content, we make sure that people know that up front, and in that way, you always know that you're able to use that story after it's given to you. And then finally, after someone submits, it does go back to your website. So if you want it to go immediately to a donate page, if you want it to just go back to your homepage, maybe to a sign up to volunteer page, something like that, after someone submits a story, it's going to go redirect to your website. So it all, as you can see here, it's got your logo, it's got your branding, and in that way, people will feel secure giving you their photo, video, or written testimonial. And like I said, you can go ahead and scan that QR code and literally see how it works if you would like. But after the content is submitted, that's when it gets to the organization process. And what we do is we manage your MemoryFox story bank. So every single piece of content is going to automatically populate in your story bank. You have the ability to go ahead and tag it based on how you might plan to use it. We see a lot of people will tag their content by program, maybe by the event it came from, maybe by the department that it impacts, or how you plan to use it. For example, a lot of people will tag their content with something like annual report, and in that way, they'll remember when they're putting together their annual report, oh, that was a really good story that I want to make sure I put in and don't forget to put in that report. Also, you have a bulk upload option. So all the content that you already have, it's super easy just to upload that to your story bank as well. And that really is also helped out by the fact that it is unlimited storage. So we know you all have great stories to tell. We don't want people to feel like they are being barred from uploading any of their stories. It is unlimited storage when you have a MemoryFox story bank. And then in terms of sharing, we actually offer a ton of options that help you make your stories into really compelling content. You know, a lot of people are looking for more short form social media posts, short form videos that really get your mission out there. We actually have a video editor within the platform that you can combine, you can edit, you can trim, you can do all sorts of things with your videos in there. We also have this cool feature called our Story Builder, and it helps you create a shareable web page where you can display several stories at once. So you might have an email that you're sending out as a thank you to your donors, and maybe when they go to their story page, they can see some testimonials from the people who they helped this year. Something like that is really compelling for people to see several stories in one place. In terms of sharing, you also always have the option to download the high quality original. So I don't know if anybody on the call has had the same experience as me, but I would often get people to email me photos. Then they would show up too big, too small, too blurry. It's a thumbnail. I can't use it. When you have a submission to MemoryFox, that avoids all of those problems. And then finally, we are integrated with Canva. So I hope if you work at a nonprofit, I assume you do, I hope you have Canva Pro, which is free for nonprofits. When somebody submits to your MemoryFox account, it's going to automatically populate within your Canva account as well, right in the little app section on the side, as you can see from this GIF here. And that's just super helpful because then you can just drag and drop into an already existing graphic design that you have, maybe with your logo, maybe with your branding, just makes it super duper easy. And then I will just quickly finish this up by letting you know that a lot of people will ask, okay, well, how much does this cost? Well, like I said, we actually believe that all nonprofits have great stories to tell, and therefore we provide equitable pricing that is based on your $9.90. So we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to capture those videos, photos, and written testimonials that they need that will support their fundraising efforts, but also a lot of other efforts at your organization. And if you are interested in connecting with one of our MemoryFox storytellers today, go ahead and scan that QR code, or you can head to memoryfox.io/demo. And all this will be in the follow-up email, so don't feel the need to write this down. Okay, so again, thank you all for coming today. This has been a really wonderful webinar. I know we all learned a lot from Ellen, and I look forward to connecting with you all again in the future. Be on the lookout for future MemoryFox webinars. Thanks, everybody.